Okay, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Leap of Faith podcast. And today we're going to be talking about pyramid technology, but not just the pyramids in Egypt. We'll be looking at other megalithic sites throughout the world, and we'll see how they all kind of had a similar uh, technology, and how they all not only did they have the similar technology, but they're also related in far as their position on the earth and how these certain lines, what some people call ley lines or lines of energy that circumnavigate the globe, were all lined up to all these different megalithic structures throughout the world. For example, we have the pyramids of Giza, but then we have the monolithic site in Peru, in South America, and then Easter Island off the Pacific Ocean. I mean, the Moai sculptures are these big monolithic sculptures that they had. And then we find even in Cambodia in Angkor Wat, which is a temple, a Hindu temple that was built not in the BC time period, but about 1150 AD. So just under 1,000 years ago, that temple was built that we know. And all these sites all around the world, they all connect to one another. And it seems like not just the pyramids had a technology of energy, but it seemed like all the other ones had some type of hidden technology too, and it all has to do with these lines of energy that circumnavigate the globe, like what they call in England ley lines, and then in China they knew about them. They called them dragon lines. But we're going to focus on the pyramids of Giza, and we'll talk about how even with the type of technology that they had, or the theory anyway that they had, is similar even to what Nikola Tesla discovered. And we're going to compare the Tesla tower that was installed around 1901 to 1912 with Giza, with the pyramid there, and how they're basically Tesla didn't discover it, he rediscovered this energy, but it looks like the ancient people were using this type of technology thousands of years ago. And to focus on that real quick, so look at when you look at the three pyramids of Giza, and not only the three pyramids, but like I talked about, all these other megalithic sites throughout the world. They didn't just have a relation to each other on the Earth. They also had a core. They also corresponded with the cosmology, with the stars, with the what was overhead, in the night sky, or even in the sun and the moon. That how they related to one another. And we'll look at Stonehenge, like that was like a calculator, like a calendar that they were able to map out the solstices, the movement of the moon cycles, and even the Earth cycles. And what we're finding out is that these buildings or these monolithic structures, these temples, they didn't just have one function. Like the pyramids, let's say it was a tomb. Well, they may have done something like that, not necessarily burying the dead, but it was almost like it could have been used like as a ritual, like a temple of initiation into the mysteries. But then it also functioned as like as I could other people have suggested, like even like accredited engineers. Like there's this guy named Christopher Dunn. He wrote a book called The Giza Power Plant, and he's come to the theory, as well as other people have, that they were used the pyramid to generate electricity. But also the three pyramids, if you look at them in plan, they also line up to the three stars in Orion's belt, and that's what you see with the temple in Angkor Wat in Cambodia. That it lines up, or it's kind of positioned, the temples and the buildings on that plot of land. It all lines up to the constellation of the dragon. You know, and so it's very, very interesting. So that all these structures, it was a multifunctional use, and it was almost like in some ways you could say that it had medicinal properties as well as generating power. That these structures were built over sites where the power, this energy that was this subtle energy that was comes from the earth, basically like these two lines of energy would kind of bisect or intersect, and at that intersection is where they decided to build these temples or these structures, and they're
Yeah, there's like
populated
some
all
kind of
throughout the earth.
like a vortex or something is what I've seen something about that
Yeah,
and
it's
doing
like, yeah,
Like they can
It's
even
like
make
it's
food and stuff grow. Like they make them in
yeah,
I think in Russia they actually make their greenhouses like pyramids. Um,
yeah.
so it's supposed to be
That's
something to help the food and stuff grow better.
right. That's what they were. That's what some people have suggested, that it was a way not to just power, use it for like to light to light. You know, they didn't just use it for to as a electric light to light the night sky, to light so they could see where they're going at night. It was a way to like generate food. You know, like they could actually make the crops grow faster, or not faster, but better, more. It would be more of a full harvest. You
And you
know,
would
so it
see
would feed.
I was
And you
saying
would see what?
you would see why the like the pharaohs and stuff that they would want to be buried in the pyramids. It's like they're leaving their people, that power, or and
Yeah.
that's why they would probably build them too. Because they're leaving their people that power, and then it also the people from my aspect of looking at Egypt, the people kind of looked at the pharaohs as gods, so you
Gods,
know
right.
yeah, so
Well, that's
that kind of
interesting.
seals the deal on that, on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that the now that now even the ancient people of Egypt, like not the ancient people, but the more the locals, the people that live in Egypt now, like the older people that when they were growing up back in the 1900s, they were still able having to had this indigenous wisdom that they would pass down, and it was known that the pyramids of Giza, the three pyramids, were never built for tombs, but there were other temples like other pyramids like the Step Pyramid in Saqqara in Upper Egypt that was built as a tomb, I think for Pharaoh Djoser. But they even like the Bedouins or whatever, they'll say that, or not the Bedouins, but you know, the Egyptian uh, people, the older people, they knew that the pyramids, and at least in Giza, weren't really meant for tombs, because even when the Egyptologists, when they went in there, they never found any mummies in the Great Pyramid, or any of the any of the three pyramids of Giza, the Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaura. They never found any mummies. They never found any hieroglyphics, and so they knew that they had to. So there was some type of different. They were using it for something. There was a different function. And as far as if you look in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, there is a sarcophagus, but the lid is missing. It's just the so people think, well, they must have buried somebody in here. But again, using it as a multifunctional structure, that when somebody would go into the king's chamber, it was like a rite of initiation into the higher wisdom, the higher knowledge of this esoteric knowledge. And for example, it's believed that Plato, the Greek philosopher, that he went to Egypt, and he really like implored the Egyptian priests to like teach him their secrets, their wisdom, and after about maybe over 10 years, maybe even longer, they finally allowed Plato to come in and learn their mysteries. And it was said that as part of his initiation, one night, he went into the king's chamber, into the sarcophagus, and stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Christ in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. And it says that he went in a man and came out a God, you know? So whatever kind of and we don't know exactly what day he went in, the position of the stars and these kind of things, but that's what's been passed down, is that that Plato was and that was a part of his initiation into the Egyptian mysteries. So yeah, the Egyptians were something else. Even the ancient people, even in Mexico and Tikal and in Guatemala, these sites that they have, these pyramids that they have in Mexico. You have the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Sun, and then you have the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. And what's interesting about these pyramids is that they all have the similar. Those pyramids in Mexico. If you draw an azimuth, it's like a line from those pyramids in Mexico, and then you go through and then you line them up with Giza, and then you continue and you follow that line, and it lines up with pyramids that are in China. And that's just it. That's what you don't hear a lot of, and it's because the Chinese government is trying to keep it under wraps. Is that the pyramids? There's a lot of pyramids that were built in China, but the Chinese government is basically planting trees on top of them and putting, covering them with dirt and putting and planting trees so that basically the basically to cover it all up. But but it's a reality that if you draw those pyramids in Mexico, you line them up with the pyramids in Giza, and then you continue that arc of that line, that azimuth, it lines up with the pyramids in China. And then transversely, if then you take a line from the Moai sculptures in Easter Island, you extend that line to Peru where you have Machu Picchu, those monolithic structures, and then you continue that line, and again, it lines up with Giza in Egypt. So it's like you were saying, like it opened up this vortex. So maybe like what they were doing is we all know that there's a the Earth has an electromagnetic pool on it, right? There's like magnetism going on. There's a lot of like there's energy from coming from the Earth, and by building these monolithic structures over that vortex or whatever, they're able to not just tap into it, but then even magnify that power to where there's like a surge of power coming from these sites. And these monolithic structures were instrumental in doing that. And they had to have this high wisdom, this knowledge to be able to do all this. And it's like they said, they really it's like the exoteric story is that they had slaves building the pyramids, but they ancient the people of Egypt, the people that know, they say, "No, they weren't slaves. These were all capable people that were experts, and they knew what they were doing." You couldn't have a slave couldn't build the pyramids like the way they did, you know? They had to be people that actually really, really knew what they were doing. It takes really skilled labor to do all that,
And
and that's not what you could get with.
wasn't there one in one of them had like a toxic gas or something, and like a bite like a offshoot of well, like battery acid or something like that.
Well, that's in the Queen's chamber. Like if you look in the Queen's chamber, you'll see like there's like this salt. It's like this almost like this corrosion that you see in the Queen's chamber. And then if you go and then there's a shaft in the Queen's chamber, and they went up in there with a little robot, and they found that it was sealed with another rock, but there was like these two copper coils coming out of it, and they looked eroded. You know, that those other that and so that by that excess of salt and that corrosion on those copper wires that was in that shaft, it's like this had to be in a byproduct of some type of electricity, you know? And the thing is that the pyramid is built over an underground aquifer. And these aquifers, like we know that whenever there's running water, like a current of water, it generates electricity. And if there's an opening in the ground, like there are in Egypt, you'll see them around there, around the Giza plateau. If you have a beam of sunlight that hits the water, and not just moving in one direction, but like in a zigzag pattern, and that's how these aquifers are. And there's even man-made tunnels too that they made that there's evidence for that. And so when that sunlight passes on that flowing water, and that you would get from these underground aquifers, like when the Nile would flood each year, that would generate power. That would generate power. Uh, so uh, so that there's evidence for some type of there's evidence that's one way that they used that they harnessed that electricity. And now, what's interesting, and then how about the charge for that electricity? You have to look into the type of rocks the type of stones that were used to build the pyramids, and it was the type of stones that they used to build them. The majority of them were called. It was a type of limestone, but it's what they call a dolomite limestone, which has a certain amount of metal within it, like magnesium. And other limestone doesn't have that, like the Tura limestone that the pyramid was believed to be covered with, like the casing stones, that didn't have any electrical charge in it.
What is
So if
that
you
called?
have these stones that
Dolomite.
have, I think it's called dolomite limestone, yeah,
Dolomite.
I think that's what they call it. Yeah, but those stone blocks and those stone blocks, uh, those dolomite limestone that had the charge, and that was what was built. The whole pyramid was built out of. And then when they cased it with that Tura limestone that didn't have a charge, well, what does that tell you? That's like insulation. That they were able to keep that energy, energy that was being generated, they were able to harness it and keep it in there, like that Tura limestone, that white limestone that once covered the pyramid. That's what made it like it's an insulation that they were able to control that energy. And then on top of it, and talking about Wi-Fi, like with Nikola Tesla with his tower, it's believed that at the very top of the pyramid they had what they called the pyramidion, and it's believed it was made out of solid gold. And gold, as we know, is like one of the most highest conductors of of electricity, right? You know, they use copper wire a lot, but but gold is even it conducts electricity even it's like the best conductor of electricity.
Yeah, it
So it
is.
makes sense that if you yeah, so it makes sense that you would have something so basically they went all out to build these structures at the pyramid. And like in the king's chamber, they have a sarcophagus again, but that was maybe used for like I guess rituals, who knows. But I don't really think that they buried anybody in there.
Yeah, and that's
And
just
not only
because they say that's what that's what they say this is when
oh,
they
I know.
who discovered it.
Right.
I
Well, even like in high school, they're going to tell you, "Oh yeah, the pyramids were built to be the burial chambers of the pharaoh, and it was Pharaoh Khufu that had them build the pyramids, and his reign from when he started his reign till he died was like 20 years, right? So that means that they would have had to have built the pyramids in 20 years. And knowing what I know about the pyramids, not like I'm a great expert on it, but there's no way that they could have done it in 20 years. There's absolutely no way. You know, in my theory, it probably took them more than 200 years to do it because it's just so massive. You know, and it's not just the one pyramid, but then you have the other two. You know, the Menkaure is smaller, but the one in the middle, uh, Khafre, that's huge. That's a huge pyramid as well. And it's interesting that talking about the limestone theory, if you look at the middle pyramid, you can still see that at the top, there's still some limestone left from when from after it was looted. You can still see some. They still kept some limestone at the top, but it was at one time it was all covered. It was all smooth. And the reason why they don't have the limestone now is because believed after a certain amount of time, people started to loot that limestone, like when Egypt declined, and then they used it. People use it for building materials, whatever. But yeah, the glory days of ancient Egypt is just a thing of the past now. But at one time, it was a flourishing civilization, and there's been all kinds of theories about how they were built. The one theory that they say that they had blocks of stone pulled with ropes of slaves, and they put wood under them, and that's how they rolled them up there. I mean, there's really that's kind of laughable, actually, that if that's how they did it. But if you look at how close they are together, these blocks are like it's like you can't even get a knife in between them, like a piece of paper. It's like so close. And my theory, I have one theory, is that it's possible, and look again, comparing it with other sites around the world, that the pyramids weren't joined in place. They were cast. And what I say by that is that they may have had the technology to pulverize the limestone, to pulverize the stone, and then use some type of epoxy or some kind of binding agent, and that would re-solidify it, and it would be, and then they would just instead of just cutting each stone next to each other, they would just pour it after that other stone cured. They would pour it right next to the other one, and then on top of it, and that's why they're so close. That's why you can't even get a piece of paper between them, is because they weren't cut into place; they were cast into place. It's almost like it almost looks like they were glued together in some ways. And that's my theory. I could be wrong, but that's a possibility. And the reason why I say that is because I've looked at other sites across the world, like in Baalbek in Lebanon. There's this one column that's on the ground. It's like a ruin, and in the middle of that column, there's a square tube that goes all the way through it. You know, all the way the length of that cylindrical column. And the thing about it is, in the middle, around the square tube, there's like no space. There's like no cut marks. It just looks like it's like fused together, like what you would like when you would pour concrete and you would put something in the middle of it. Everything, and when it would cure, everything around that whatever that foreign object was that was in that concrete is just almost like fused together. Like it just hardened to where it's like adhered to it, not that it was cut into it.
like a
And that's
mold.
what we see in it's like a mold, right? Exactly. And so that's why I think that's why I think that these stones are so close to one another, is because they were molded into place. It was a mold that they had that they went around. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean that's a possibility, you know. And to go back, but really want to go back to about generating electricity. If you look in the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, all the walls and floor, it's lined with granite. It's a different type of stone. They use dolomite limestone for the blocks, and then Tura limestone for the casing. But then in the inside, they used a granite stone. Now, why did they choose that? Well, it's known that granite produces a certain type of radioactivity, like it produces radon gas. So basically, when the stars where the sun was they were able to harness the power from the sun, and then the energy coming from underneath, and the current from from these underground aquifers, they were able to generate some type of Wi-Fi, like some type of electricity, just like what Tesla did with his coil back in the early 1900s. And when they installed Tesla's coil, what's interesting was is that they built it in Long Island over an aquifer, and guess what? It had subterranean channels too that went down. And so it was the same. So basically, Tesla didn't discover it; he rediscovered it. But the ancient Egyptians and possibly other cultures from all over the world had it as well. You know, so that's amazing how they were able to do all this in such a long time ago. You know, we think, with the people say with the theory of evolution or whatever that, we evolved and we were primitive, we were cavemen or whatever. But it seems like these ancient Egyptians and other ancient cultures, they were smarter than we are now, and that was how, and they started advanced. It's almost like humanity started in an advanced uh,
But
state of being, and then we kind of decline.
there's a lot of
What's that?
theories that that is what happened, you know, and we're being suppressed. Um, you know,
Yeah,
like when you take, well, like Nikola Tesla's the ether, you know, free energy that's all
hmm,
around us all the time. So
right,
yeah,
right.
there's a lot of motives to suppress us too, you know.
And money's involved. Money's involved because with when Thomas Edison, he was a contemporary of Tesla, and then I think he was anyway. Don't hold me to that. But what he did was that kind of drove Tesla out of business was that when Thomas Edison discovered or he had his invention of the light bulb, he made it to where it was an explosion energy to the type of power that we have now to power the light bulbs, and by doing so, JP Morgan was able to make a profit off of that. So that's why Edison was able to make was wanted to make money, which appealed to the robber barons, whereas Tesla wanted free energy for everybody, which wouldn't make anybody rich. Well, it would make people that it would make the common people give them a break, but then the rich wouldn't be making their profits. So that's kind of like another way. That's another reason why Tesla was kind of driven out. And but yeah, like the knowledge is suppressed. It is. Uh, even in the days when they were building these structures, the knowledge was very kept well within this inner circle of what you would call like either the priesthood or whatever that they had, because these secrets, because they were so awesome and so powerful, that if they shared it with everyone, then nobody would have that power. So there's a certain amount of power play, a struggle for power involved with all this, kind of like that movie Quest for Fire. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but there's like this primitive people, and basically they were dependent on fire for everything. And if the fire went out, how are we going to get it? And they were so backwards that they didn't know how to make fire. They were just dependent on like if a lightning struck a tree or something. I mean, I can't remember. That's been a long time since I've seen this movie. But anyway, they went on these cavemen like Neanderthal type people went on this quest across the earth to find fire, and they come upon this group of people that's a little bit more advanced than they were, and they showed them how to make fire by rubbing sticks taking some kind of like kindling, and they would rub a stick together on this other stick, and then the smoke would come out and the flame, and then they would light the kindling, and that's how they would get their fire. And so they were so amazed by this, and then they came back to their tribe with the with the fire that they made, and they try to implement that technology. So it's a kind of a funny movie, but it's interesting because really, energy. I mean, it's been a quest for fire ever since the beginning, and who controls the power uh, has the fire, has the most fire. Whoever has the fire and knows how to produce it, they have the power. You know, and they're
Yeah,
not going to share with Tom, Dick, or Harry. They're the common people, especially if they can make money out of it. So
and talking
that's just the
about
way it is. But
like suppressed archaeology, like even right now to this day, like look at that Obeke Tekbe. I think I'm saying it right, but
yeah,
the
Gobekli Tepe in Turkey.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they found some more. Like there's a whole bunch of it that's just undiscovered, but it's discovered. Like they know it's there, but they're saving it for a newer generation to discover it. Why
I
is
see.
that? You know, that's there's suspicious stuff to me with that kind of
There def there definitely there definitely is. Even in Egyptologists in Egypt, like that one guy, Zahi Hawass, Dr. Zahi Hawass. There were some people like when Graham Hancock was coming to him with these theories, Hawass was kind of like blowing them off, like, "Oh, that's just fantasy or whatever." And it's just because what this stuff does is these new discoveries. It doesn't jive with mainstream archaeology, like you were saying. It doesn't jive with like the official story. There's like a certain when there's a certain amount of supernatural activity involved, the mainstream just tries to cut that off altogether. Like they don't want to have anything like that. It disturbs their psyche or something. But as far as like talking about Gobekli Tepe and talking about how these ancient cultures could have been in contact with one another, if you look at the statues, these columns or whatever that they carve with people like humanoid figures on them, the hands under they go down like it's like it's a long column, and then it's like a humanoid statue, and then the hands go down at the bottom like they're holding their stomach. Well, if you go to Easter Island, that's in Turkey, that's in the Middle East. But if you go all the way to Easter Island in the Pacific Ocean, those moai, when they started to dig down to just investigate, they found they did the exact same thing. Those moais, those sculptures went down deep into the girth, and guess what? At the bottom, they had these elongated hands, and they're holding their stomach, just like the ones in Turkey. So it's like, and it's and it go and on that same thread with Gobekli Tepe, there's some writing that's on that like this ancient writing that they can't decipher, but yet it looks similar to what they found in Pakistan and some monolithic sites over there. So they had to have been the ancient people must have been in contact with one another, and it's believed that they circumnavigated the globe. That's why they were able to tap into these energies and these sites across the globe. There had to have been an international endeavor to create these things. It couldn't have just been a coincidence. Like if one isolated civilization was building the Machu Picchu, the monolithic structures in Peru, and then you had the people in Giza doing it, and somehow and they didn't have any contact with one another, but yet somehow they lined up. That's kind of far fetched, really. They had to have been working together somehow, in my opinion, you know, and it's just too much of a coincidence for it to be it's just too much, it's too random for it to be a coincidence. It had to have been planned, to do that. And that's what they said. Like after the flood, the people, uh, they were able to circumnavigate the globe, and they were able to pinpoint the with really close accuracy, the circumference of the Earth. And that's what you find in the pyramid. Again, talking about it being a multifunctional building, is that within the pyramid lies all the dimensions of the Earth, like the size of the Earth, the circumference, uh, even related to the moon. All these things, it's incredible how they were able to incorporate all that knowledge that they knew of, all the scientific knowledge, and that's just it. This science that they had, like it wasn't like they were atheists, because like a lot of scientists today are atheists, but back then, science and religion were one thing. It was called a sacred science, and they didn't separate their science from their religion. In fact, they were fused together. That's why on these sites, where they were generating electricity, it wasn't this drab, boring looking power plant. They had these elaborate temples that they were building, like highly artistic. So they were incorporating science, religion, art, architecture, and even astronomy. Because they were able to, if you look in the chambers of in these shafts in the pyramid, if you go back to about 2500 BC, when they believe that the pyramids were built, by going back into the star, using the computer to go back into to calculate the star alignments, the parent the constellation of Osiris would line up with those shafts. So they had, and again, like talking about the three stars of Orion's belt, they were totally they're that's how the pyramids were modeled after. And if you do an overlay, if you take the constellation of Orion and the three stars of Orion's belt, and you overlay it with the pyramids, it's an exact match. It's unbelievable how they're, and not only that, there's other structures throughout Egypt that correspond to other stars in the constellation of Orion. So basically, the Egyptians were building heaven on earth, and that's what we see with the Cambodians in Angkor Wat. They built that whole constellation of Dragon, the Dragul's constellation. They built that on the earth as well. So again, it's a multidisciplinary, multifunctional, higher intellect, all this kind of stuff going on is what's happening at all these sites all across the world, and not just Egypt. But Egypt was like the crux. It's almost like you could say that you could say, and scientifically speaking, that Giza, the pyramids, is at the center of the earth. And what I mean by saying that is that if you take the world's landmass, you take all the landmass for the Earth, and you pinpoint it to the center of that landmass, of all the different continents, it comes to a center point where the pyramids are built. Giza is the center of the world, and when that and as far as and as we know that the Giza pyramid is probably the most accurately, most well proportioned building that's ever been built. So it would make sense that if the ancient people had this, if it was an international endeavor to build the pyramid, then I believe the leadership was Egyptian. But if it was an international endeavor, it would make sense. They would make the grandest of all the temples, the grandest of all the monuments, the megalithic structures would be at the very center of where everything else would basically tear from. And basically, like is like the pyramid was like the headquarters for all these other civilizations, you know. And like I talked about with Stonehenge, it was used not just to mark the sun, but also the moon. And if you look, there's these different these holes that are in the ground around Stonehenge, and it was discovered that they found that they would put these wooden shafts in there, and and they would use that to measure the movement of the moon. So it wasn't just a solar calendar, but it was a lunar calendar as well. And of course, what did they use? What did they do? That's a possibility that they had human sacrifice. We've talked about that before. It's possible, to appease the gods or whatever, but they're part of their religion. We know that the Aztecs did it. And again, that movie Apocalypto was basically like it talked about how or it showed how they would do human sacrifices on these temples. And they would line them up, and again they would line up these temples to be the it was like to line up with the solstices.
Yeah, a lot of the pagan
You know,
stuff.
this,
Well, a lot of the time stuff is from the pagans. So, um, keeping track of time to, well, like you said, for
right.
sacrifice and stuff like that.
And it wasn't just for sacrifice. And when you say the term pagan, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were just evil people. Like what they were doing with the human sacrifice, yes, that was evil. Don't get me wrong. But if you take that out and you look at other parts, like with other things that they were doing, it wasn't 100% intrinsically evil. But they were doing, but the fact that they were trying to tell time, mark the seasons, that's interestingly enough, that's what you find written in the Bible, because when in Genesis, when God created the world, He created man, and he told them, he goes, the sun, the moon, and the stars, there so that you'll be able to mark the seasons. It does say that in the Bible. And what's also interesting is that when Graham Hancock was doing the research into finding out uh, when constellations could be in line with all the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything, and even with the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, he found that they all pointed to this time period of 10,500 BC for the perfect star alignments. Now, what's interesting about that is if that means that the world is at least 10,000 over 10,000 years old, like that's when the humanity started that first time. There's something tricky about that because Angkor Wat we know was built less than 1,000 years ago, yet yet for it to line up with the constellation, it would have to have been built in 10,500 BC. But we know that that didn't happen. So basically, all these ancient people, they were all trying to pinpoint basically maybe when the earth and when the world was created. And there's two things I'll say about with Christianity. We talked about the Bible, is that according to Orthodox theology, Orthodox Christian theology, Greek Orthodoxy, is that we believe that the earth was created in 5,500 BC, and we also believe in the flood. So it's been a debatable thing that when the flood happened, it could have altered the Earth's axis and thrown things back 5,000 years. So when the Egyptians and the Cambodians or other cultures are trying to pinpoint the first time, uh, going back to 10,500 BC, may have just been the offset may have been offset by 5,000 years from 5,500 BC when the world was created according to Orthodoxy. And what's even more interesting about the Orthodox connection is that when they did these calculations, it was 10,500 BC, but on the month September and on the first day of that month. So that was September 1st, 10,500 BC. But what's interesting, what I want to say is that the Orthodox New Year falls on September the 1st. That's our ecclesiastical New Year. So you have the Bible talking to God telling Adam to look at the stars and the sun, and the moon for they'll mark the seasons, and you'll study these. He tells them to study them, and and we believe, as far as the Orthodox Church is concerned, that mankind was created in 5,500 BC. And the first day of the year in the church is September 1st. And then you have Graham Hancock and these other scientists going back on the computer to find that the world was or the first time that these ancients were trying to get back to or plot in the stars was September 1st, 10,500 BC. But when the flood happened, then we know that there was a firmament around the earth, and there's a theory that when the flood came down, that the firmament cracked and sent all this water flowing down, and by doing so, it was such a cataclysmic event that it threw the earth off its axis enough to where it may have thrown everything off by about 5,000 years. So them trying to pinpoint 10,500, it may just be pointing to 5,500 BC. And again, it's just a theory. That might be just maybe too much of a leap of faith for me. But we really don't know. These things need to be further investigated and looked into. And I don't think there's a problem with that as far as somebody shaking their faith. Because it's interesting because me being an Orthodox Christian, uh, I believe in the Bible, and by looking at these other monuments, it really doesn't shake my faith. And in fact, I can. It tells me that it's more proof that there's a God than for there to not be one. When you look at how accurate and how all these things line up all throughout the world, it's almost like if mankind discovered this, and by making these discoveries, it connected the world and it made things so perfect to where these things align on the earth. And that's evidence for a divine creator. That's evidence for intelligent design, you know. And as far as and I wanted to talk about these lines of longitude across the world, how back when people started just the past few hundred years, when people really started to map out the world, and to write these degrees of latitude, what we find out is that Giza is 72 degrees of longitude away from Angkor Wat in Cambodia, but from Cambodia to Easter Island is 144 degrees, and from Easter Island to Giza is 144 degrees. So you see, they've used these structures, these man-made structures, to basically to map out the world, and they've literally bisected the world by doing so. So again, this cannot be just one group of people without any contact with another group of people. It had to have been a worldwide and international um, secret pact that they had. That they would when they found these sites, and they all tie in together. And if all these structures, there's a religious element to it. So again, it's not just a science where science, like today they try to separate science from religion, but again, the ancient world, it was a sacred science. Science and religion were united. So these are amazing things. These are amazing discoveries. Uh, and it just shows you that the ancient people It just shows you that mankind did start off advanced, and then there was declines, and then there would be a renaissance again, and that's basically the period all throughout human civilization. Empires rise, empires fall, civilizations, even a global civilization, it could be like a golden age, and then it goes into decline again. And that's one thing I'll say about the modern world. I think that everything's so bad that the future can only be better. You know, it can only get better from here, hopefully, because it really can't get any worse than what we have right now. So anyway, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that when all the aftermath of all this nonsense that's going on in the world in politics, that we can have a renaissance. That's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I'm looking forward to. So yeah, so that's about that pretty much. I just want to wrap things up. I didn't want to go too long today. I know there's a lot to talk about. I could talk a lot more, but I don't want to make this too long of a video. But I think that's interesting. Like, just to recap events, we could say that the Egyptian pyramid, it could have been used for energy, like a power plant. The way that it was constructed, it could have been used by some type of molding technology, and that's what we see the same thing in South America with Peru, with these stones, that they're so odd shaped, but yet they're so perfectly fitted together. I mean, the mason, if a stone mason was to do that, it'd be the most skilled thing ever. But in the way that they're shaped, it could have been a mold there too. They could have had a certain recipe. They just mixed the stone with some type of binding agent, like a cement, and then when it hardened, they would all be that's why they were able to fit them so close together, that they weren't cut, they were cast. That's a theory anyway. And you'll see that in other megalithic structures, like in Lebanon, like in Baalbek, you see the same thing. The stones there, you can't get a razor blade in between those joints. You know. So, do you have anything real quick before
No,
we shut it
I
down?
just want to I just want to point out, there's reasons that they don't want us to see these things, and there's a lot of stuff that's hidden in just the architecture of these structures. Not
Right.
just not just
Right.
pyramids, monoliths too. Like, well, even our modern day ones. Just take DC for
Yes.
example.
Right.
It's
Oh,
on one.
exactly.
It's
Right.
on one of these ley lines, and we
Yes,
have monoliths there, and when you take the width of them, like
I know.
there's a lot of little secret stuff. I mean, it's very interesting. I suggest anybody to look into it. But
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
you have, like, what is it, the the rubit, the cubit, uh,
Cubit.
yeah, the
Cubit.
cubit. It's like their measurement, but their measurement system was even perfect, because not only was
It
it a
was. Right.
way to measure, distance and weight and everything. It was even used to measure time precisely.
That's right.
It,
That's
it, it
exactly right.
is it is crazy, and all of this information, it's hidden in the infrastructure and
Uh-huh.
stuff.
All right.
It's
There
it's just the building that never stops talking.
That's a good way to put it, honestly. The building that never stops talking, and that's what it is. That's why when they built these structures all over the world, people with that same type of hidden knowledge, they were able to read these, even though they had just like the Tower of Babel. Like when they were built, what were they were doing? They were building something. They were building this monolithic structure, this tower. And when God confounded their languages, how did they communicate with one another? They couldn't communicate with their. They had different languages, but they all had the same type of symbols of building, like the square and the compass, for example. So if they had those symbols, they could communicate that way. And so like Washington D.C. is a total riddle in stone, as they say. And like the Washington Monument, that's an obelisk, that's an Egyptian monument. And it's kind of interesting. Like if you take the as far as the measurements go, it's 6,606
60, yeah, it's
60
six
inches,
six
60
six, yeah,
yeah. But then if you take that in feet, it's 555,
555,
555 feet.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of there's all they're basically they're telling it they're putting all this stuff in plain sight for anybody that wants to investigate. They can find it, just like what they did with Rennes-le-Chateau in France when they built
Well,
those guys. That
uh,
was that was this. Go ahead.
on a lighter note, Stephen Hawking sent that record into space. I mean, the aliens are gonna
Hmm.
look at our math and they're gonna get all completely
Hmm.
lost. Because they're probably used to the real good stuff.
Well, it's kind of funny when I think it was, gosh, I forget what the name of it was. I think it was, I can't remember the name of this rocket that they sent into space. I think it was 1974.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Uh,
talking about with the
Amer
golden record. With the golden record, right?
yeah, and
Was
they
it
sent
Stephen
this pic. They
Hawking?
sent,
I thought it
I
was,
don't know if
or it might have been.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it might have been the other guy, the one that was
Carl
trying to
Sagan.
Sagan. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember, but what they did was they put this picture. They had this picture that they put in that probe, and it had a drawing, and it had mathematical equations on it. It had two people, a man and a woman, showing them that the if there was alien life, to show them that human beings are a sexual species. We're binary or whatever. They're male and female, and all these different secrets of or like the science behind what was going on Earth, and they put that that space probe, so that if any artificial, not artificial, uh any life, any extraterrestrial life in the universe could find that, and they would be able to decipher what type of life was going on Earth. That's one thing. That's what they did, and that was, I forget the name of that probe, but it was, I think they launched it in 1974, and that's what they did. Yeah, so
Viking, I think,
I
wasn't
don't
it?
know.
Yeah,
I can't.
I don't want to
Maybe.
lock it down on the
I
name, but
know. Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's
can't
what I was
remember.
making a joke about. I was thinking, saying like, well, the aliens probably know the Egyptian math and like the real stuff. So when
Well, I mean, well,
we sent these equations out, they're gonna look at it and be all lost, because it's supposed to be a map on how to get back to our planet too.
wow. Okay. I didn't
There
know.
was a lot of information on there, on that
Hmm.
little golden record.
Right.
The record was
And
gold
talking about
too.
the,
That's
wow. Okay. And talking about the golden record, are you talking about the golden section? That's something that you'll find in nature too. The Fibonacci sequence. Uh, that's like in a mathematical that, and the Egyptians did that. Like they had the Temple of Karnak. The way that the columns are arranged from like the top of the end of the head of the temple, all the way down to the beginning. It's all used on the Fibonacci sequence in mathematics. So yeah, so like the Egyptians were using a high level of math, and like the pyramid, like the way that they built it, like all the different equations that went into it. It's the most perfectly. It's like if there's ever a building that was made that was perfectly proportioned, geometrical shape, it's the pyramid. There's not a more perfect building ever built than that building. And like I said, it would make sense that that's in the center of the earth, because if you're gonna have if that's the headquarters for all these other sites, then yeah, it's gonna the most intense, the most perfect building is gonna be there at that crossroads. So that yeah, so that it's this is fascinating. So yeah, so this definitely takes, like, you could study this for a lifetime. And there's been Egyptologists that have done that. Like have John Anthony West. Robert Bouval. He wrote that book with Adrian Gilbert, the Orion Mystery, and he talked about how he found out how the three stars of Orion lined up with the Giza pyramids, and then they found other pyramids that lined up too, and then other places, and then Graham Hancock's work. He's found stuff around the world, and yeah, so it's amazing, you know. So this will be, it'll be interesting to see what the next generation, you know, like these guys are getting old. I think John Anthony West, he died a few years ago, and then Graham Hancock, he's getting older, and so is Robert Bouval. So it'd be interesting to see like the next generation of explorers or researchers. And the beautiful thing about the internet is that everybody has access to this, you know. So just it could be like a grassroots thing
Yeah,
that
that's
it
why I
couldn't
think
just be
they're.
just one or two
That's why I think they're keeping the Obekatekpe stuff
prop under wraps.
yeah, under wraps, because
Probably
they
some
they
people.
know they know,
Yeah.
like before they could, with the pyramids and stuff, it was really just the Smithsonian and stuff like that. So if you didn't have that those credentials, you couldn't even have a word on it.
Hmm.
But now
Right.
with the internet, it's a lot harder for the lie to travel faster than the truth.
Right. But the only problem with the internet, you get a lot of like funny stuff too, like silly
Yeah, that's
things
true.
where
That's true.
so so it's kind of a you go from the main the whitewashed academia. That's one thing. Then you get the independent researchers like we talked about, and then you get the Looney Tunes people on the other side. So that can be, I guess, if you wait,
Double edged
it's kind
sword.
of
Yeah.
strange, but yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but at the same time it's like comic relief, you know, like talking to people online about ancient history. I mean, it's like some of the most funniest things, like these comments, man, that people really believe this stuff. It's so Looney Tune out there, bizarre, but it's like comic relief. I really, at first I got annoyed with it, but then I started laughing. I said, "This is hilarious." And so it is pretty silly, but hopefully that there'll be some serious work to be done. The only problem that I'm worried about with the pyramid is that they're really trying to curtail all this stuff. Like they have like people, like they have armed guards that guard the pyramid at night. They build this huge fence, like this huge wall, like a 14 foot high wall. Like I think it's like 20 miles long, all around the perimeter of the Giza plateau. They don't want anybody in there doing this crazy stuff, like I was talking about. They don't want these Looney Tune people coming to the pyramid and spreading all kinds of weird ideas, you know. So yeah, so I think the only way like to really get involved, to really study the pyramid, is you would have to be invited by the Egyptian government, and it would have to be supervised by them. That everything that all the documentation you're making had to be supervised by them before you were able to publish anything. So in a way, that's good because it keeps all the craziness out, you know. But hopefully in the future there'll be some legit people that are tired of all this ancient aliens kind of stuff that they hear on the History Channel or whatever, and do some serious intellectual investigation. So we'll see what the future has in store for us. But as far as this talk's concerned, I guess we can bring it to a close. Like I said, there's a whole lot more we could be said, but for time constraints, I'm trying to keep it within an hour's time period. So maybe we can, and if anybody wants to look in, I made some other videos on my channel. For example, there's a video called "The Celestial Architecture of Ancient Egypt." I think it's like a 7-minute video. So and I talk about the star alignments of the Giza and the Orion's belt and stuff like that. Uh, so yeah, so that's what I have on my channel, and then you can find some good stuff. Like there's some books, like I would recommend the Orion Mystery by Robert Bouval and Adrian Gilbert, and then Graham Hancock and Robert Bouval, they co-wrote a book too. I think it was called Keepers of Genesis. That's a pretty good book too. And then John Anthony West, he made a good documentary series called Magical Egypt. Yeah, I think you can maybe find that online. Maybe on YouTube they might have the videos still, or you could find it on Amazon or something. But those would be the, if anybody would really like to see like intellectual, legit, and not a Looney Tune wacky kind of ancient alien kind of videos. If they really want to see like an in-depth well documented, well sourced research. Look into. I would recommend people look into the work of John Anthony West, Robert Buvall, and Graham Hancock. So anyway, I'll go ahead and bring this video to a close. Uh, I appreciate your input, Tin Man, and we'll see y'all next time.